Either Al Gore or George Bush will become the next president of the United States. Mark my words. So I think what we'll do tonight is, we talk a lot about specific cases, specific hauntings. But tonight I think what I'd like to ask Ed and Lorraine is, how do you know when a house is haunted? What are the various types of hauntings that are occurring out there to people? How would they recognize the various kind of spirits, perhaps an earthbound spirit, a demonic spirit, all those types of supernatural occurrences? So I think I'd like to start, if I could, tonight with Ed. Ed, how do you know if a house is haunted?
Well, first of all, people will call us up and they'll say, Tony, I think there's something in my house. And I'll say, why? Well, from my peripheral vision, I sometimes see a shadow. Or I believe I hear doors opening and closing at night, and I see these lights shooting across the room when it's dark in the bedroom. Maybe little scratching sounds, which could be attributed to some rodent or something. But then there's the knocking sounds.
Right.
These are all the beginning stages of what we call infestation. As the family lives in the home longer, things will build because they'll become more frightened. As they become more frightened, they throw off psychic energy into the atmosphere, which those spirits or spirit will use as a fuel to manifest itself. Now, if that spirit was in the house when they moved in there, then we have what we would call an earthbound spirit or an obsessed spirit. I remember in Waterbury, Connecticut, there was this big, beautiful mansion up on a hill there, and it was an Italian villa. The man who owned it had a motto in his living room, carved right in the wood, mine, always mine. He wasn't kidding, Tony. He was always going to stay there, and he did. 4 families bought the house. 4 families were driven out of that house. How did he drive them out? They used to actually hear a voice, a materialized larynx, shouting to get out. This was his house. He was obsessed with it. He was going to stay there. Well, that's one type of a haunting. When you hear a voice like that, and it's audible, you know there's something there which shouldn't be there. Then there are spirits which we call earthbound, which don't realize that they have left that dwelling in spirit. They stay right on. They love the house, or they want it so bad as this Italian fellow did. But, all ghosts aren't harmful, aren't negative. They simply want to dwell in the place that they love the most. We have a lot of this at schools where janitors were never married. The school was their whole life. They stay right there. Say in some institution, like a mental institution, a hospital, you have these old guys that have been there for years and years. It's not that they mean any harm. It's the only home they ever knew. So they don't want to leave it. So they stay right there.
So that's like an earthbound spirit?
That would be an earthbound spirit. Earthbound because it's not progressing to where it should go, Tony.
See, all cases of spirit infestation, Tony, are not always hauntings, though. I mean, you can have a loved one who is going to return. Maybe they'll return in an automobile to forewarn you of something or to guide you through a situation.
She says in an automobile, they're not driving the automobile.
No, they'll
it's
peer.
It's like the one over in Colorado telling the wife what to do during a snowstorm.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not a haunting. A spirit has appeared, but it's not necessarily...
Okay, so because a spirit appears doesn't necessarily mean it's a haunting.
No.
What is a haunting
A
then?
haunting is where there's infestation,
Terrifying.
Tony. Terrifying
scary?
things. Things that are very frightening. If a spirit of a loved one wanted to visit us and appear at the foot of our bed or appear at a family gathering or wedding or a christening, I mean, that's not a haunting. And it doesn't even require investigating it, Tony, because you don't want to get rid of somebody like that. What you want to do is try to explain to a family exactly why that spirit is there. But hauntings are definite infestation. That is where there's knocking sounds, there's doors opening and closing.
Bed shaking.
Yeah.
Pounding sounds. But a visitation apparition, that's all together. They're usually different than what we've been talking about. They appear probably once. For instance, a young man that's in the Army, he's killed over in Korea or World War II, whatever. At the moment he dies, he's thinking of being home. He's there instantly. He doesn't have to get on a plane or a train. He is there through thought instantly in that house. His mother, his father, maybe his wife will see his apparition. That's like saying, although my physical body is gone, I survived the grave. That's a gift from God. That's a visitation apparition. The crisis apparition, this is similar to what Lorraine was talking about. You might be driving along, say on a stormy night, and I'm thinking of one specific case that I was told about years ago. The woman her husband died. She was driving along and she could hear her husband's voice telling her to stop the car, just as audible as my voice is being heard right now. She stopped the car, and lo and behold, she could see a lantern up ahead. Guy comes running up to her, the bridge is out. That's a crisis apparition. The husband's spirit came to her and warned her not to go any further, and she heeded that warning.
That happened also. You know where else that happened, Tony? That happened right on Route 8 outside of Torrington. And that was told to me by a nurse from Charlotte Hungerford Hospital. She was on her way home. The roads were starting to ice in that area, and she was very, very frightened. Her brother-in-law had only died months before, and he appeared next to her and took the wheel. And
He actually took the wheel.
he actually put his
Now,
hand.
how could a ghost
Yeah.
grab a wheel? It's
How could that
invisible.
happen?
Well, the spirit solidifies. A spirit can't solidify to the extent that it's almost like cement. Just like when Glenn Pinnell hit that night, the white lady in front of the cemetery. She was as solid as a cement structure. But a spirit can move things either through solidifying or through what we call psychokinesis or psychokinesis, where mind over matter, they stop something through thinking about it or grabbing a woman's hand. I've had many spirits grab my arm, but it's not exactly like you would feel somebody grab you. It's like a pressure. You can't move your arm. And that's what she's talking about now.
Yes, and things like that, Tony, they're beautiful things. They're
Yeah, they're not haunting.
I mean, they're not hauntings, but they're beautiful experiences, which shows that, you know, the spirit survived death of that physical body and was still interacting with the family.
How many times have we had spirits tell us they were present at their accident? They knew exactly what happened. They could see their own bodies. They're on the road. They attended their own funerals. They tell us funny things that might have happened during the funeral, people that were in there. And in one case, a young girl that was killed in an accident, she followed her body all the way up to Maine where they buried it. Then she told us about how this wreath fell right into on top of the casket. Now, how would she know that? How would they know that? She was there.
How did you communicate with this spirit? Was it through,
It was
through a psychic or something?
Tony, I believe you were at this lecture with us. I believe you emceed that night, and the young man that was at that lecture, which he helped out in the school, was a quadriplegic?
Yeah,
Quadriplegic. And he had very strong upper arms, but he only had stubs and his
Then he was a paraplegic. Okay.
And so he, anyway, he had been in the choir with this girl.
Yep.
And so when she died, her family was from Maine, and that's where she was going to be buried. But she appeared to him, and he said he received the message from her and she talked to him through her mind. And of course, we know that she reached him telepathically. And the message she wanted to get through to him was that she didn't want her parents to continue to grieve to the extent that they were, and how much it was bothering her. And grieving does stop the spirit from
That's what I was
passing
going to ask.
on.
Is that like kind of inhibit the spirit?
They try to
Yes.
stay there to console the people, their loved ones.
Yes.
You know, my father, he was open-minded, but he was a very religiously oriented man. I don't think there was a day that ever went by he never said the rosary. But after he died, his car was left to me. My mother gave it to me, and it was all locked up. He had a horseshoe driveway at the time, and the car was parked there in the driveway. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. all of a sudden the hi-fi went off, full blast. Now on the hi-fi, Lorraine had flowers, she had a couple of statues. In order to turn that on, you had to pick up the lid, turn it on. But that thing was going full blast. That woke us up, and we could see that there were headlights of a car streaming into the windows, into our living room.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, did somebody get in, start the hi-fi? I jumped up, I went out, it was my dad's car. I went outside, the car was locked up, but the lights were on. The lights were on, the hi-fi went off. My father did that to let us know,
And he was okay?
without scaring us half to death, that he was there.
Wow.
Those
But
are
Tony,
physical
but Tony, if you have a house that is truly haunted, you know it.
No doubt.
Okay, what other things happen in a haunted house besides knocking? So, what
Well,
else is
people can actually be physically pulled out of their beds.
Things
There-
missing.
There are things that are dematerialized, Tony, and they'll reappear
there? Okay, so
at
some
another
signs
location.
that your house might be haunted would be what?
Change in temperatures,
Mm-hmm.
lights going on and off, doors opening and closing.
Television's going on and off.
Yes, electrical appliances. It affects the electricity in the
Psychic
house.
cold spots, like an icy spot when you walk through it. If you get a hot spot, then that means that you're dealing with something inhuman, diabolical.
And also, there's what we call magic whispering. Now that is very common in a haunted house, and this is how people describe it. They will say, "We can hear talking, but you cannot make out what they are saying."
Almost like people talking in,
At a
talking in another
distance.
room.
In another
You
room.
can hear the voices, but you don't.
And,
you don't
and
know
it
what they're
goes up
saying?
and down like a conversation will, when people are expressing themselves. But on the other hand, you can't make out words,
So any kind of strange sounds too, you think?
Now these are hauntings.
smells, and sounds.
Poltergeist is altogether different. A poltergeist will show itself morning, noon, and night, 24 hours a day. When I say show itself, I mean that things will be smashing and breaking, maybe burning. People will be attacked physically. Chairs will topple over. Pictures will fly off walls and smash and break. Vases will fall off. You'll hear pounding sounds. The poltergeist is a German word. It means mischievous or noisy ghost. But there are fire poltergeists, water poltergeists, puncturing poltergeists, many different types, rock-throwing poltergeists. These are the ones that you hear mostly about. I would say at least once a week, if you were to look through all the newspapers in the United States, you would find what we call rock-throwing poltergeists. These rocks fall on the homes. They usually materialize about 30, 40 feet above the house. They come down in a slow, zigzag manner, striking the house, but sometimes breaking windows.
And they're warm to the touch.
Oh yeah, that's an apport. These stones have been brought from many, many miles away. In Bethlehem, Connecticut, in 1953, which is maybe 20 minutes from where we're sitting right now, Michael Healy, he described himself as a woodcutter. He had a small building where he used to cut the wood and carve things out, I guess, and for 2 years, stones just fell on that house periodically, not 24 hours a day, periodically. They had state troopers, they had the town constable, they had neighbors, friends, all surrounding the woods, thinking that somebody was doing that. But how could anybody, have stones appear and come down in a zigzag manner? There's no way you can
Defies
do
gravity.
Yeah, it defies
that. But
gravity.
they were
It
trying
does.
to think logically, right? So eventually it did stop. And if you drive by that house today, you'll see a shrine out in front. And many of the stones that fell from the sky actually are made up in the foundation of that shrine.
Yeah, that's what he
But
did
that's-
with it.
Then at Eichler's Cove, which is right near
Right
here,
here, right here.
Lake Zor, we had stones weighing over 20 pounds that were falling on 3 different dwellings there. And
They did damage.
I'll never forget it. We were called out by Channel 8 news team. We went out there and there was a detective and a police officer standing there by a car, and they had this kid. He was probably 14 years old. I said, well, what's happening? We got him. I said, you got him? I said, who? They said, he's the one who's been doing it. We caught him up on the hill up there. I said, wait a minute. This boy was up on that hill, threw 20-pound stones that came down in a slow zigzag manner. How did he do that? He did it. We know he did it. The Newtown police. All of a sudden, the detectives hit right on the shoulder with a stone. The kid standing right alongside him.
Then what happened? They let him go?
They let the kid go. What else could they do?
They definitely let
We explained to them that this is a typical poltergeist phenomena, the falling of stones. Now, it amazes me. You could ask any 10-year-old kid today, what's a poltergeist? They'd know. But you ask this detective or the cop, they don't know. I mean, where have they been? They got their heads in some kind of a sand pile someplace, like an ostrich?
Well, just like that Bridgeport.
Yeah,
Chief.
Bridgeport.
Yes.
That's
Walsh.
a good example.
Walsh.
He's still alive,
And
right?
again, Walsh,
Oh,
why
yes,
don't
he's
you
still
come
alive.
forward and tell the truth? It's 25 years later. Look, you put your own men on the carpet. They were telling about all the things that were happening in that house on Lindley Street, hour after hour. You come along and say that a 9-year-old girl fooled at least 8 or 9 cops in the kitchen, ourselves, 4 or 5 people, a couple of reporters, the parents. That kid could move a refrigerator weighing over
So,
400
in other
pounds
words,
without a senior do it.
He made the patrolmen look like a bunch of idiots.
He made
That's
the
right.
church look like idiots,
Why
too.
doesn't he come forward? He's retired. The crowds are gone. He doesn't have to worry about putting
No.
up barricades anymore.
Yeah.
Walsh, come forward. Tell the truth. You made these people look foolish, and how the media could fall for that is beyond me. He said the little girl was a ventriloquist. She was the one that was making the sounds coming around the cat. He never said who was the one, the psychiatrist, that found that out, or how they proved the kid was a ventriloquist. She was not. We were there. We know what we heard. We know what we
So that was
seen.
a real haunting, huh?
Well, that's
Oh.
the poltergeist haunting.
That was a poltergeist.
That was a poltergeist.
That
Something
went
bad?
on
Something bad.
Yeah, that's
Definitely.
bad.
Smashing,
And Tony,
breaking.
it goes on round the clock. It never lets up. It's not like it's going to start once it gets dark. That's all day,
When you
all
walk
night.
into a house like Lindley Street,
Oh,
you
it's
know how like
just-
some hauntings, the phenomena will stop when you go to
Yes,
investigate it?
yes.
But in Lindley Street, it didn't, huh?
No.
Well, let
No.
me give an example.
Tell him about the electricity part of it, honey.
Well,
That's what's interesting.
I was sitting in the living room. It was a very small house. I could see the table and chairs in the kitchen. All of a sudden, you would get this ozone smell like electricity.
Yeah.
I could see the table starting to shake. It went right up in the air, did a flip, came down. The chairs flew in all different directions. Not only once. This happened every day.
Who
every
saw
day.
this happen?
Oh,
Police officers, firemen,
numerous.
Chief Zwirling walked in, the fire department. He's seen 3 huge reclining chairs jumping all over the place. We used to call them Mama Bear, Papa Bear, and Baby Bear. He said, there must be some kind of witchcraft here. And the first priest that went in there, what was his name from the chancellery?
Oh, he was from St. Patrick's,
What was
honey.
his name?
I don't remember the name right now.
Well, he walked in and said,
from St. Patrick's.
it's definitely something diabolical. But after the chancellery bishop talked to him, he changed his mind
No,
fast.
they wouldn't
did?
allow.
Oh, yeah, it's ridiculous what they do.
It's
All right,
really
so
a shame.
when you walk into a house such as Lindley Street,
It's very uncomfortable.
it's almost like you don't need to be told what's happening
no,
because
Oh,
Looking-
it's
there's
right
things
People
happening.
all
there.
talking excitedly.
Yeah.
I remember when I came into the house that first time, I think it was November 23rd, wasn't it?
Yeah.
1974. There were policemen in there, firemen in there. They were all talking excitedly. I have this all on tape, you know. The first thing I did was interview the officers, the firemen, the family, anybody that's seen or experienced anything.
These
I know
police
that's
officers had
important.
written statements too, right?
Right.
And yes, it has them.
I have all the police statements. I knew from experience they would say, the little kid did it. That's a cliche they use. I don't know why. I think it's because the police don't know what to do about it. You know, they walk in there, they want to help, but they don't know what they're up against. They just don't know how to stop it.
Okay, so in that house, we weren't going to talk about a specific case, but in that house, what kind of a spirit was there?
Demonic.
A demonic
Definitely
spirit.
demonic.
Well,
Anything
it-
as powerful as that is demonic.
I mean,
and it's still there.
And it lasted.
It's still there?
It lasted.
You say it's
yes.
still in the house?
All right, let me tell you how we know this, Tony. Because during the period of time after Mrs. Gooden was killed and then Gerald died,
Yep.
Mr. Gooden.
Mr. Gooden.
Gerald Gooden, yeah.
Yeah, Gerald Gooden died. Right after that, it went into the hands of realtors. Somebody was in there taking pictures, Tony, showed all the great big black globules,
ghosts.
shadows all over
It's
the
not
place.
as active as it was, but it's still there.
It's like
just
dormant.
remaining dormant, that's
it's
all.
it's just waiting, Tony, for someone to go in there that can activate what is there. And there are many ways to activate it. You can be animosity between family members will activate it. alcoholism, drug abuse, opening doors through Ouija boards.
Okay, now why would the alcoholism and drug abuse and animosity cause a haunting?
Because it creates a type of energy in that house, and spirits are attracted to
Anger.
it by the
They're
aura.
attracted to that?
By the aura, Tony, by the aura. They're attracted to the aura of individuals who they've gone against the laws of God. They're destroying the physical body that God gave them. So that aura is going to change. The spiritual aspect of the aura is going to change. And that's what attracts these spirits to a particular
But also
location.
in this case, it was a child. She was, I believe they call it a Seven Nations Indian from Canada. And she was a very unhappy child.
Oh, yes.
In fact, she had been beaten severely. She was at home. She had a tutor coming to the house, the teacher. And the voice coming from the cat, not from the cat, but around the cat, understand that. It's what we call a materialized larynx.
Okay, so we should clarify that she wasn't beaten severely by the Goodens.
No.
That was
She
prior.
was-
In
by
school.
kids in school.
Kids in school, Tony, because they felt she was different.
Okay.
That is so sad, but they did feel she was different.
So you have a very unhappy child here. Her only friend was Sam the cat. And she said, I used to talk with him, he talked back to me. The cat was not talking. It's a materialized larynx. Very rare, but it happens. We've been involved in about 6 cases where such phenomena has occurred. So you have an unhappy child. The energy of this child is all pent up inside of her. Spirits can use this. As she becomes anxious and angry and depressed, she throws off this energy. This is what we call a poltergeist. We use that. Now, parapsychologists, scientists will say, well, these PK rods, psychokinetic rods that supposedly project in this child are only effective up to 14 feet. That's the scientific explanation. I immediately take the child out of the house when I go into such a home. I have them drive that child miles away with the mother and father so nobody can say it's the parents or the kid doing it. And then I provoke in the name of Jesus Christ. And things will be flying around. Where's their theory then? Where are the PK rods? Where's the psychokinetic energy? Sure, it may start with the child in the beginning, but then it takes over.
In the Gooden house where you said it was demonic, you think there's more than one spirit there?
One spirit always attracts other spirits, Tony. So where you have one spirit in a house, or where you have one ghost in a house, it's going to attract other spirits.
Did anybody ever see, in, like, for instance, the Gooden house, any
Yes.
manifestation?
Yes.
Yeah, they did.
We had a young seminarian, Paulino. The first thing I did was to call him up. He was at our house. I said, Paul, come right down. You stay with this little child. Stay with her every minute except when she goes to the bathroom. If she's in one room, I want you in that room with her. I want you to observe her 24 hours a day. He did that. We left to go home. It was around 9 o'clock at night. We went home to get some something to eat, wash up, get some different clothing. And when we got back, Mr. Gooden, Laura Gooden, the wife, Marcy, and him were all outside in the street. The freezing, it was a cold night. I said, what's wrong? They said, we can't go in there. I said, what happened? What happened was that Paulino, a seminarian, started to say prayers in the house, which I told him not to, chanting. Suddenly this black shadow ghost appeared. He could feel hundreds of pinpoints of electricity all over his body, just like I felt in Amityville. They ran out of the house, they ran across the street to one of the police officers' homes. They were knocking on the door, they let them in. But then after they got in, there was pounding on the door. And the officer said, who's that? He says, you don't want to find out. That came from their house over to this house.
Wow. Was that the same kind of thing that happened in West Hartford?
Yeah, well, it happened the same year too, you know, Tony.
Well, what was the
the
thing in
only
West
thing
Hartford about?
different in West Hartford that happened that was
was the Donovan
violent.
case.
Oh,
The
that
Donovan
was
case.
yeah, that was demonic case, and that was why. But that started through the use of a Ouija board, Tony. That all started through the use of a Ouija board, and not only that, but we had huge, heavy things dematerializing in that home. I remember this one night. Ed went in the master bedroom with all the family members. They were all in there. And I walked down the hall, and I just stood in the doorway of the bedroom, you know, just talking. And I turned to leave, Tony, and fell over this big extension ladder that had been in the garage, which was attached to the house. I watched as doors dematerialized. It's the only time in my life, Tony, I have ever watched anything dematerialize and then reappear in another room.
The doors themselves?
The
Now,
doors
that's
themselves.
teleportation.
Yes.
The molecular structure of the item is broken down so that it dematerializes in one place and materializes in another.
Yes.
People out
Yes.
there find that hard to believe, but it happens all the time in the cases we're involved with.
Was the Donovan case worse than the Lindley Street, about the same? Or
Well,
I'd say about the same.
I would say it was because it was different in many aspects, Tony. It started in a different way. It had other types of things occurring. Had tremendous damage. Tremendous.
to the house? To the house?
The house. It was the interior
Didn't something
of it.
happen to your car there?
We want
that
to hear
was
this?
in the Donovan case.
What happened to
Let
your
me
car?
tell you, we had a brand new Chevette, brand new. I don't think the car had 200 miles on it. Ed did not want to park it in their driveway, so he parked it on the street in front of their house.
I said, I'm not parking that car in there.
I don't blame you.
And so when we got ready to leave, Tony, the car is all locked up. When we got ready to leave the house, the windshield wipers were off the front of the car and on the passenger side seat.
The signal, the
Wait a
signal
minute.
switch
Wait,
inside the
wait,
car was
yeah.
broke off.
Was broke off.
Hold on a second. The car was locked.
Locked.
Yes.
When you left the car, you locked it.
Yes.
When you got back
yes,
to the car, the windshield wipers were inside the locked car.
Yes, and the
And the turn
shift,
signal,
switch was
the
broke
turn
off.
signal was
the
broken?
turn signal, that was broke off the car. So we couldn't. That car had to be towed back to the dealer again. Now, it was not that next day. Oh, yes, it was. It was late at that day, and the guy called us. The mechanic called us from the agency, and wanted to know, were we kidding? Tony, that was embarrassing. The wires underneath the hood of the car were all braided like you'd braid hair. Were all braided together.
Really?
Yeah.
They have done
What
braided?
could do this?
What
Yeah,
could
you
do
know,
that,
Nothing
person
in
Tony?
this world, Tony.
No
No.
person.
That bothers you a lot when you see things like that.
Another night coming back from that same house, Lorraine and I, a young lady was with us. It was a foggy night, very foggy. And we were out 84. And I could just see about maybe 25, 30 yards ahead of me. All of a sudden, there was a car with its lights off right in front of me.
Parked.
Right parked in the middle of 84. I swerved that Chevette, almost turned it over, went up on top of the grass lawn and turned and went around. There was no car there.
There was
That's a
no-
phantom car.
There really wasn't a car there?
There was not a car there because what I did is I parked and I waited.
And nothing
I
came.
seen other cars come by. There was nothing there.
No.
phantom
Phantom
car.
car.
It's very
Something
it was
to, something to
Thing-
terrify you.
Doors, yeah.
things like this, Tony, they become really emotional issues when you're involved because they are so incredibly frightening. I mean, to think of the power and above all the intelligence behind, yes, the intelligence behind this.
Wow. Well, we're just about out of time. I think next show, what we're going to do, what I'd like to do next show is to talk about how you remedy a situation like this. I mean, sure, you go in and you know the house is haunted. How do you remedy it?
Right.
So for those who are tuning in late, Lorraine, do you want to give the P.O. box?
Sure. Okay, you can write to us. In fact, we'll read a letter on the next show, that one of the nice ones we got this week. You can write to us at Lorraine Warren at P.O. Box 41.
Or Ed Warren.
Lorraine and Ed and
How
Lorraine
about Ed and
Warren.
Lorraine Warren? How
All
about the
right.
Warrens?
We'll settle
P.O.
for that.
Box 41
We'll settle for that.
P.O. Box 41.
in Monroe.
Di usianya yang ke-25 tahun, Rancamaya telah dikembangkan menjadi suatu kawasan dan lingkungan yang sangat-sangat menekankan pada merawat bumi tercinta ini. Rancamaya tahap 1 yang didesain oleh John Chapman, klaster-klasternya dikelilingi oleh World Championship 18 hole golf course-nya seluas lebih dari 45 hektar. Masih ditambah dengan penghijauan yang masif, pemandangan spektakuler, kualitas udara dan air bersih di atas rata-rata masih dapat Bapak Ibu miliki. Estate management kami dan shareholders kami dengan peraturan ketat kepada seluruh pembeli, pemilik, penghuni dan stakeholders mengajak bekerja sama merawat Rancamaya demi meningkatnya nilai aset dan kenyamanan.
One of the great privileges of working at History Hit and making films together with our team at Timeline is the access we get to extraordinary historical locations. Like this one, Stonehenge. I'm right in the middle of the stone circle now. It is an absolutely extraordinary place to visit. If you want to watch the documentary like the one we're producing here, go to History Hit TV. It's like Netflix for history. And if you use the code TIMELINE when you check out, you'll get a special introductory offer. See you there.
Whispers Estate definitely has its own personality, I can tell you that.
We think that there's something inside the house or that the house itself is alive.
It's eye-opening.
There's not a word to describe that feeling.
As we were setting up everything, I see a little girl, full body. As I looked up, gone.
The house is alive. It knows who it wants in this house and who it doesn't.
Whispers Estate is the name that was given to the house because of the paranormal activity that guests encountered. Whispering in the ear, kissing noises, things like that. It then grew to more prominent activity. You could be in the front parlor, you could call out to Dr. John and you could get a response from him, or you could call up to the second floor and you would hear Rachel sing or giggle or skip across the floor. The earliest record we have of the house is 1894, and those are based on the Sandsborn fire maps of that time. 1899-1901 is when Dr. John and Jesse Gibbons bought the house from Dr. George and Sarah White. There was a remortgage on the house, and we believe that was what they used for preparing the doctor's office on the east side of the house, on the 2 rooms on the first floor. December 15th, 1910 is the first advertisement in the Mitchell commercial newspaper advertising Dr. John's medical practice. The only photo we have of Dr. John is from a 1916 yearbook from the Mitchell High School, stating that all calls are answered day or night. Dr. John had his medical practice in the house for approximately 27 years before he was forced into retirement. Prior to that time, at the end of May 1934, is when his wife, Jessie Gibbons, passed away after a bout with double pneumonia. "3 years after his wife's passing, there was an insanity inquest initiated against Dr. John, that he was a danger to himself and to others. 4 days after the insanity inquest was initiated, it was concluded stating that Dr. John was not insane, did not need hospitalization.
In later years, he became a little bit senile, and I think his license was revoked for a little while, and then he got the license back, and I think his brother at one point had to have him committed.
Can you tell us some history of Dr. John?
Some of the history of Dr. John that we have suggests that he's a good, benevolent individual beyond reproach. However, some of those articles were also written by Dr. John himself. So it's kind of a biased viewpoint. There's been a number of secondhand accounts we've heard from people that he was a bad doctor. Some of the people who've lived in the senior home here in town mentioned that he would never mention both Dr. John and his brother, Dr. George, in the same sentence or in the same conversation for that matter. The woman who sold the house to me, she mentioned that she was always told when she was a kid to stay away from the bad doctor's house. That when she had to walk to and from school towards the end of the doctor's medical career here, that she was told to cross the street, pass the house, and then cross back over, just so she wouldn't be in front of the house.
Why was that?
We haven't gotten any concrete details. However, legend and lore states is that Dr. John, well, that he was a womanizer, took liberties with female patients, things like that. There's a number of comments in the insanity inquest that he had lost feeling in one of his hands, that he would carry a gun around town, he had threatened to kill people, walking around town in his pajamas. During the insanity inquest, the AMA came in, confiscated all of his medical records, his equipment, and forced him into retirement.
Various people lived in the house over the years. It's been an apartment building, it's been private residences over the years. So many people have lived at that house.
From 2000 to 2004, the house was vacant, at which time it was bought by the previous owner. But when he started doing renovations, a lot of paranormal activity started to occur. Whispers in the ear, knocking, footsteps, rapping on wood, things like that. We've had people scratched. We've had candles fly across rooms. We've had beds shake uncontrollably. Doors have slammed open and shut. You can hear children giggle and play, skipping across the floors. Doorknobs have shaken vigorously from 3 to 5 seconds, then stopped.
I've had experiences in Dr. John's room with being scratched on the back of my neck. I have heard my name being called in the middle of the night. I have slept in the front parlor and had the chandelier smacked violently.
September 26, 2011, and I had been broken for a night and a half because a little girl had gotten scratched on the second floor underneath the stairs going to the third floor. So a night and a half of provoking. When the last guest had left, I had sent all the volunteers home, and there was a thunderous explosion in the house. I mean, the whole house shook. It was no backfire of a car. It was no gun fired half a block away or anything like that. I mean, the whole house shook, and that's when I sat up like, oh shit, I'm in the house by myself. I heard 4 or 5 thunderous footsteps, and when it got done, it was right over on the second floor where I was sitting. And then I was like, okay, it didn't happen, it's just your imagination. And then from behind me, 2 rooms back, I heard the same explosion, and then I started hearing things getting knocked over. And then 3 or 4 footsteps coming forward, and when that stopped, it was right around the corner from where I was at. I'm like, screw this, I got my keys in my bag, and I was out the door.
What was knocked over?
Nothing. That's the amazing thing. It sounded like medical instruments and the trays that surgeons or doctors or nurses might have set up to do an operation or something, but nothing that I heard was in the house.
Gimana mbah? Hidup po kan pasti.
Pasti balikan lagi sama doi.
Di mana guys?
Cewek.
Oke.
Pasti nongkrong bareng.
Besok ya.
pasti utang dibayar.
Besok!
Pasti nikah sama si doi. Ternyata emang gak ada yang pasti.
Paket sampai mana ya?
Ada kok yang pasti. Klien parcel pasti. Paket telat sehari, ongkir ganti.
After we decided we would come here, we wound up on the front porch looking in. We were waiting for the other group that was currently in here to leave. As we looked in, we could just see this ominous shadow, very large, waiting inside the dining room. And when we got to the parlor, we heard what sounded like footsteps coming from the basement, one by one, very methodically. All the lights were on, nothing obstructing our view. However, slowly it started to get darker and darker as we're just looking down here, almost as there's a shadow moving towards us. And as it started to come closer to us, all the sound dropped out of the room. As that shadow started moving progressively forward, the energy of the room just turned electrifying. All the hair on our arms started standing up. You could just feel this energy pulsating. Slowly, this thing rushed towards us, and we heard, just this giant gust of wind just rushing at us. And at that point, we ran out.
Some staff and I were here cleaning, and we decided, I think we're really tired. We need a little bit of a nap, so we thought we'd take a little nap in between. And I was asleep,